When Karen, the fearsome HOA president, threatens to destroy my garage sale, I ignite a rebellion against her tyrannical rule, but will it cost me everything? It was a crisp Saturday morning, when sunlight spilled over our cul-de-sac, illuminating the eclectic assortment of my family's belongings, arranged neatly on tables in our driveway. I stepped back to admire my handiwork, a sense of anticipation swelling in my chest as I envisioned the potential buyers who would be arriving any moment. I had spent weeks organizing this garage sale, rejuvenating old furniture, cleaning out closets, even curating a special collection of childhood toys for families looking to add some nostalgia to their homes. Just as I waved to a couple of neighbors approaching, a voice cut through the air like a sharp knife. "You can't have this here." I turned to face Karen, the notorious HOA president, her chunky frame outlining a bitterness that spilled into her every word. She stood before me, arms crossed tightly, her oversized sunglasses perched precariously on her nose. "The bylaws specifically say no garage sales are allowed. You'll receive a citation if you don't shut this down immediately." My chest tightened, anger bubbling beneath the surface, as her cold blue eyes bore into mine, daring me to protest. I had had enough of her puritanical reign. "Karen, I've worked really hard to set this up. It's just one day," I replied, clenching my jaw against the mounting frustration. I could feel the eyes of the neighbors turning towards us, some whispering, some glancing quickly away as if they were being distracted from an awkward scene. I could see the disbelief reflected in their faces, that Karen had decided to pitch her flag in my yard today, claiming sovereignty over something that should have been about community and connection, not rules and restrictions. "She's right," chimed in Tom, my neighbor from across the street, offering his solidarity as he adjusted his baseball cap. "It's just a garage sale, Karen. What's the harm in letting her have this? It brings everyone together." He gave me an encouraging nod and my heart leapt with gratefulness. Was there a chance the tide might turn against the HOA bully? Did I dare to hope for support? Karen's face flushed red beneath her perfectly coiffed hair. She had become used to being feared, her authority revered. I could almost hear her inner dialogue as she processed Tom's dissent. "This isn't just any neighborhood, it's a community with rules that keep it in order." She shot back, her voice like ice. "We cannot have everyone acting like they're running a flea market. Today it's a garage sale. Tomorrow, who knows to go trucks in the driveway?" Each word was laced with disdain. I felt a mix of disbelief and defiance rising within me. Who cared if a garage sale turned our quaint little neighborhood into a flea market? The vibrancy would only enrich our lives. I looked back at the items on display, the retro lamp I had restored, the collection of children's books I had painstakingly dusted, even my daughter's old bicycle, with a shiny red bell still gleaming in the sun. Each piece had a story, a memory attached, and I wouldn't let Karen's cold-hearted decree steal that chance from me. "I'll be happy to sign a waiver where I take full responsibility," I countered, a surge of determination making my voice firm. "But I'm not shutting this down. This is a part of who we are as neighbors. We should be working together, not against each other." I stood a little taller, letting my conviction push back against her imposing stature. Did I really think we could stand up to the HOA together? Should we even try? "Waivers mean nothing to me," Karen retorted, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "This is about authority. Because of people like you, I have to fight to keep this neighborhood what it is. You think this is all a joke? I will report you to the HOA and you'll be sorry." She leaned in closer, the bitterness radiating off her. I could smell her cologne, a harsh floral mix that felt like vinegar on my nostrils. Before I could respond, my neighbor Linda approached, her 2 children in tow, their eyes wide with curiosity at the growing commotion. "What's going on?" she asked, a hint of concern in her voice. I could sense she'd been drawn in by the magnetic pull of conflict, like a moth to a flame. It struck me that this could turn into something bigger than me, perhaps even a revolt against Karen's iron grip. Peering past Karen's shoulder, I saw that more neighbors began to gather, their expressions shifting from shock to interest. An idea burst forth in my mind, bright and radical. Karen marked my driveway as the battlefield, and I could feel the weight of the neighborhood shifting. This wasn't just about a garage sale. It was about refusing to let her antagonism dictate our community spirit. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, I faced Karen head-on, heart racing but steadied by the energy of my neighbors, forming a silent support around me. Perhaps I wouldn't be alone in this fight, after all. The sun was beginning to rise higher in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over my driveway as I assembled the last few tables. My heart raced, a cocktail of excitement and trepidation swirling within me. I stood amidst my carefully curated collection of toys, clothes, and furniture, the fruits of our family's latest decluttering campaign. It wasn't just a garage sale. Today was about embodying resilience against Karen, the HOA's self-appointed queen. With neighbors rallying around me, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation, a silent promise that unity could challenge authority. As I laid out the final items, I couldn't help but notice the steady drip of neighbors trickling into their yards, each one exchanging animated glances, whispers, and knowing nods. My close friend Linda flashed me a thumbs up from across the street, her 2 children excitedly inspecting their own treasure troves to sell. They understood the stakes. This was no longer simply about rummaging through forgotten childhood toys. This was our opportunity to mitigate Karen's stranglehold on our community. I caught myself smiling, feeling emboldened by their support. Then I saw her, the unmistakable figure of Karen, silhouetted against her immaculate lawn. The way she marched towards my driveway sent a shiver down my spine. Her stern features painted a clear picture. She had not come to engage but to assert her dominance. I swallowed hard, anticipation bubbling up and threatening to spill over. Today became more than merely organizing sales. It transformed into a bold showdown. I gripped the edge of the table, taking a deep breath as she approached, all the while curious about how my neighbors would respond. Selling all this junk? Karen spat, hands braced on her hips, her demeanor as imposing as ever. You're still going through with it? The bylaws don't just disappear overnight because you want to play shopkeeper. Her indignant glare caught a few neighbors' attention, and I could feel their collective tension rise. Each of them stood vigilant, ready to support me, their murmurs swaying my courage back into place. I squared my shoulders and met her icy blue eyes without flinching, reminding myself that I wasn't alone in facing her tyranny. Actually, I'm grateful for my neighbors' support. I shot back, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. We're tired of living in fear of the iron fist of the HOA. Today is about community, not control. The words resonated like a rallying cry, igniting flickers of hope and something extraordinary, a growing movement against the oppression of one woman's disgruntled reign. I felt a rush of adrenaline as neighbors moved closer, their body language implying newfound solidarity against the HOA's queen. Karen's expression morphed further into disgust, tinged with disbelief. But this time, instead of retreating, she pushed back harder. Community? If you can't follow the rules, you risk ruining property values, she warned, her voice dripping with disdain. What comes next? Junk cars and driveways? I will report you to the HOA, and you'll find yourself in a world of trouble. The smell of her overbearing floral perfume hung in the air like a dark cloud, amping up my desire to resist her. I wouldn't allow her to bully us into submission. No one signed up for your imagined tyranny, Karen, I countered. My heart thumped wildly, fueled by the support I noticed from my neighbors, the siblings across the street nodding in agreement. It was an unspoken agreement, a pact amongst us, that today marked a shift. I glanced at my tables again, at all the memories encased within the items laid out before me. This garage sale wasn't merely a chance for me to clear out space, but an opportunity for all of us to reclaim a sense of belonging in our own neighborhood. The day went on, with waves of shoppers beginning to arrive, each hopeful face brimming with curiosity and excitement as they picked through our assortment. A few neighbors even lent a hand, helping sort and arrange, their camaraderie sparking an electric atmosphere. It suddenly felt larger than I could have dreamed. Yet, even amidst the joyful chaos, heightened awareness lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling of paranoia as I caught Karen's figure, lingering in the window of her house, indignant and seething, her phone securely in her grip. The sight of her glaring at us, undoubtedly plotting her next move, ignited a fierce determination in my chest. I knew that today wasn't just about clearing clutter. It was about sending a clear message to Karen, where we wouldn't bow down to her rules. As the sun continued its ascent, bathing our cul-de-sac in light, I felt a wave of exhilaration and purpose swell within me. Whatever Karen had in mind for retaliation, it couldn't overshadow the spirit radiating from our gathering. We would thrive together, refuse her control, and, in doing so, reclaim what it meant to be a part of a community. It was a warm Tuesday evening when I found myself sitting at the long conference table in the community center, a palpable tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud overhead. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us, illuminating the grim faces of my neighbors who had come to discuss matters more pressing than potholes or landscaping. All eyes shifted to Karen, the self-appointed monarch of our HOA, as she sat at the head of the table, her chunky fingers tightly gripping the pages of my citation like it was a weapon forged from the very rules she had so relentlessly enforced. I could almost hear her thoughts swirling in the air as she prepared to unleash her unyielding wrath upon me for daring to stand against her authority. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice dripping with that bitter sweetness that made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was relishing this moment, waiting, perhaps, to draw blood from the audacious garage sale that had stirred the quiet community into a frenzy of rebellion. I leaned back in my chair, the wooden seat creaking beneath my weight as I glanced around at my neighbors, their sympathetic expressions giving me strength. This wasn't just about my garage sale anymore. This was a chance to confront Karen's oppressive reign. As she rattled off the details of my supposed violation of HOA rules, highlighted in the very citation she waved like a flag of victory, I felt a surge of anger rising in my chest. You see, she continued, her voice rising in pitch as her fervor escalated, such acts threaten the integrity of our pristine community. If we allow one person to flout the rules, where will it end? Next, we'll have junky cars in driveways, children's toys strewn about, and who knows what else. Her harangue painted a picture of utter chaos that felt both absurd and infuriating. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. When she finally finished, I stood with unexpected resolve, feeling my heart pound like a battle drum in my chest. Karen, I began, my voice steady despite the tightening grip of anxiety around my throat. This isn't simply about the garage sale. It's about the disconnect your rules have created in our community. We're not just faceless residents following your edicts. We are families, friends, and neighbors trying to foster connection. I glanced at my neighbors, who were leaning in, intrigued. They, too, had stories tucked away in their hearts, tales of missed opportunities buried under the weight of Karen's iron fist. As I spoke, I could see a flicker of recognition in their eyes, a shared understanding that we had all felt the sting of her authority at some point. Encouraged, I continued to pour my heart out. You've stifled our community spirit for so long, Karen, wielding rules like a sword to carve up the very bonds that tie us together. I mean, how many families have hesitated to invite friends over or hold events out of fear of violating some obscure rule? With each word, I felt the tide shifting, a ripple of solidarity resonating between us. One by one, neighbors began to join in, recounting their own experiences. Stan from next door spoke about being reprimanded for his untrimmed hedges, while Linda lamented the day her children's lemonade stand was shut down without a second thought. With each story, my resolve strengthened, and I noticed Karen's smirk faltering, her grip on the paperwork loosening, as disbelief washed over her features. I glanced at the crowd. We were weaving a tapestry of shared frustration, and it was electrifying. Enough is enough, shouted Paula, a longtime resident who had long felt silenced by Karen's rules. Her voice rang clear, like a bell tolling the start of a revolution in our small community. Encouragement bloomed in the crowd, as nods of agreement and murmurs of support cascaded across the room. It was as if we were awakening from a deep slumber, shaking off the shackles that had held us captive for so long. It was becoming clear that our shared grievances had forged an unbreakable bond among us, and what began as my individual fight had morphed into something much larger, a collective defiance against Karen's oppressive rule. Seeing this growing wave of determination sweeping through my neighbors filled me with a sense of camaraderie I had desperately craved. Yet, as Karen's gaze shifted to each speaker, a flicker of fear momentarily threatened to penetrate her authoritarian facade. "How dare you?" she retorted, her voice a mix of incredulity and outrage. But those words rang hollow against our collective unity. We were rising together like a tide against her rocky shore, demanding our right to exist freely within our own community, unburdened by draconian rules. As the meeting wound down, I felt a sense of triumph for the first time in too long. With each voice that had joined mine, the air thickened with hope. Karen had thought she could intimidate us into submission, but she never anticipated how deeply her reign of terror had impacted all of us. The tide was indeed turning. Our solidarity was no longer an ember waiting to be sparked, but a roaring blaze that would not be extinguished so easily. We were ready to reclaim our right to live without fear, and that evening left me buoyant with the promise of what was to come. The night loomed heavily over me, a blanket of darkness, punctuated only by the soft glow of my living room lamp, casting long shadows across the walls. I sat hunched on the couch, the vibrant community spirit that had taken root during the meeting now feeling like a distant memory. A flurry of emotions swirled in my chest, and just when I thought victory was within reach, a sharp knock echoed against the door, cutting through my reverie like a warning bell. My heart raced as I opened it to find a fellow neighbor, Jake, standing with a grim expression. "Karen struck back," he said, the gravity in his voice sending chills down my spine. It was then he relayed the shocking news. Karen had allied with a legal firm to combat the perceived defiance of our burgeoning rebellion. I felt my knees go weak as disbelief settled like a stone in my gut. A lawsuit? What did that mean for me? My home? My family? Images flashed through my mind of endless legal battles, piles of bills, and ultimately losing everything I had worked so hard for. I could hardly breathe, each drawn breath thick with anxiety. My bold stand against her felt like a naive gamble, and now I was left grappling with the implications of stepping into this warpath. Later that night, alone in my kitchen, I poured myself a glass of wine, hoping to drown the uncertainty swirling my thoughts. As I stared at the deep crimson liquid, it didn't soothe me like I expected. Instead, it only reminded me of the fight that lay before me. Whispers danced around the neighborhood like will-o'-the-wisps. I could feel the tensions rising among the residents. Some were beginning to question whether resisting Karen's authority was worth the risk. Would the safety of conformity now trump our collective defiance? I felt disheartened, spiraling into doubt as the weight of my neighbor's whispers uncovered the fractures we had so painfully begun to heal. With each passing hour, a sense of dread wrapped its tendrils around my spirit, suffocating the hope that had blossomed within me. The sense of rebellious camaraderie that had grown under the harsh fluorescent lights of our last meeting felt too fragile now, swaying on the shaky ground of uncertainty. I began to think back to how Karen wielded her power, with fear, intimidation, and unwavering confidence. Could we possibly contend with such an entrenched enemy? Would our ignited spirits extinguish under the harsh glare of her legal defense? My mind was flooded with possibilities, each worse than the last. Yet amid the despair, like a flicker of flame fighting against the gathering shadows, there remained a small ember of defiance burning brightly within me. I couldn't simply let my anxiety dictate my actions. Somehow, we had ignited a spark of rebellion, and maybe, just maybe, we had the strength to fan those flames into a full-blown fire. I held on to that thought, quietly clenching my fists, feeling the reality of our unified resistance still swelling under the surface of fear. Realization started to form this turbulent journey we were on was more than just a battle against a petty tyrant. It was about reclaiming our sense of belonging, our community spirit, and most importantly, our agency as individual homeowners who had too long been at the mercy of Karen's whims. What if, through the chaos and uncertainty, we could inspire one another? I could already envision the community coming together, finding strength in connection, solidarity, and the shared goal of standing against oppression. We weren't just united for me, but for every marginalization felt at the hands of Karen's rigid regulations. With renewed determination, I sat at my kitchen table, drafting a message to the neighborhood group chat, pouring my heart into words. I urged them not to let fear dictate our choices, reminding them of the stories we shared and the connections we forged. If we wanted our community back, we had to rally together and prepare for whatever Karen might throw at us next. Yes, the prospect of a lawsuit was daunting, but we were stronger together. I hoped they would see that tree of defiance that we had begun to grow. As I hit send, I held my breath, anxiously awaiting replies. The seconds felt like hours. But then, one by one, responses began to trickle in. First from Ellen, who offered her unwavering support, then Stan, and soon a chorus of voices jumped in, igniting my spirit like a wave of energy sweeping through the room. Some even suggested we hold an emergency neighborhood meeting, opening a discussion about how best to confront Karen before she struck again. It dawned on me that our small acts of rebellion were evolving into something much greater. This was more than just a series of petty squabbles over garage sales or landscaping. It was a pivotal moment that could transform our sense of community entirely. As a collective, we could find our voices and reclaim control over the narrative of our neighborhood. My heart raced as hope flickered within me again. We would rise against the looming threat of Karen's legal action. We could face whatever she threw our way. Together, we were manifesting the change we desperately craved, and I couldn't help but believe more fervently than ever that our journey was just beginning. It was a brisk evening bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, painting the conference room in warm hues as I stepped onto the stage. My heart raced, each thud echoing in my chest like a war drum. The community meeting had drawn an impressive crowd, a swirling sea of familiar faces, now laden with anticipation. I locked eyes with Karen, who sat rigid at the front table, her bitter features twisted into a mask of disdain. It was our moment today we would confront not just her, but the shadows of her legacy that had loomed over our community for far too long. As I gathered my thoughts, I felt a wellspring of determination rising within me, pulsating with the shared frustration and pain of my neighbors. I began to speak, my voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty. We all know Karen's rules are more about control than community. Every citation, every scowlet's a reminder that our homes are merely extensions of her authority. But today, we reclaim our space. My words rang clear, their sharp edges slicing through the atmosphere, igniting a fire of solidarity that had only started to flicker weeks earlier. To my amazement, as I finished my narrative, hesitant hands began to rise throughout the audience, one voice after another echoing my sentiment. An elderly woman recounted being fined for her garden decorations, absolutely stunning in their vibrancy instead of the grayscale monotone Karen demanded. A young family lamented about the harsh prohibition against their eagerly awaited trampoline, laughter now replaced by whispered frustrations. Each story unfolded like a verse in a powerful anthem, and their eye saw those previously clouded with doubt began to glisten with a revived passion that fueled me deeper. It was as if a dam had broken. The words began pouring out of us in a symphony against oppression. Burdened hearts became lightened, easily flattening the barriers Karen had erected. With each voice, her facade of control cracked further, revealing the weakened spirit beneath. I gestured toward her with an urgency that shocked even myself, pointing out how every conflict she'd manufactured had become an opportunity for us to unite, and how her bitterness and power-mongering had transformed our community from families into mere numbers on her HOA ledger. Karen's once commanding posture seemed to shrink as neighbors rose in numbers to share their stories. This was not just my battle anymore, it was ours. I felt triumph surge through my veins as the tides began to shift. Karen's cutting remarks, once fueled by an iron grip, started to sound almost desperate. She tried to wave us off with political jargon and condescending retorts, but they fell flat among the chorus of dissenting voices demanding justice. This was more than a meeting, it was a rebellion in full bloom. As the meeting progressed, I marveled at the resilience of those around me. None were backing down. Even the children, emboldened by their parents' passion, cheered at the injustice they witnessed, tipping the energy into a fervent collective will. A powerful realization washed over me. The very community Karen had sought to dominate had begun to find its voice, its strength, and its courage to stand together. The walls that once separated us crumbled, revealing a more vibrant tapestry of support and kinship. At last, the moment arrived when the vote was cast. We were asked to decide whether to dismiss Karen from her position as president, a question hanging in the room like the final note of a symphony. My palms were sweaty, the air thick with tension. I held my breath, staring into the eyes of my neighbors, all united behind this singular purpose. The results were announced, and the room erupted into cheers. Karen's authority had been dismantled. Bursting with a surge of triumph, I felt the cry of relief and exhilaration resonate among us, a chorus of jubilation competing with the fading light outside. As Karen gathered her belongings, her bitterness transforming into palpable defeat, the crowd began to chant, "Goodbye, Karen." Those momentary glances we shared became solid acknowledgments of victory. In that instant, I realized the fear no longer held us captive. We'd gone from passive specters of her tyranny into empowered individuals. The community had found its spirit again, a collective resilience stronger than even the most petty of tyrants. No longer would we cower in fear of citations or ridicule, we would instead reignite the warmth that had once defined our neighborhood. With the unity restored and Karen's reign vanquished, a new chapter unfurled before us. Together we pledged to create a more collaborative future, where every voice mattered and every neighbor was truly seen. Hope blossomed in our hearts and shone in our eyes, ignited by the knowledge that together we were an unstoppable force. We were no longer just residents of a neighborhood. We were a vibrant community, ready to stand together against the darkness that had threatened to define us. The battle was won, and from that day forward, we would carry the torch of friendship and shared values into a brighter future.